This next section I'm going to get into love and relationships a little bit. When I think about this whole area, when I did some recent broadcasts where I talked a bit about this, and I got a really strong reaction, primarily from men actually, and I appreciate that. And I got over 500 responses. I answered all of them. There's still 100 more that have come in since I haven't gotten to. But this is what I kept hearing, was just a lot of us are just uncomfortable with ourselves, and that's what I kept hearing. And and men overcompensate. We do it in lots of different ways, and women overcompensate for what the culture tells them they're supposed to be too. And if you really want to think about how women are abused, I'll tell you one of the most abusive things. Think how much it costs to dress as a woman. Just a simple thing. Now, all those designers of all that stuff, they know that. They charge you 5 times what any man will pay for that same pair of shoes or that same shirt, and they get away with it because the culture lets them. Your money gets spent in ways that doesn't have to be, because people make decisions because they know that they can take advantage of you because of the importance of your outer appearance, your shell. Your carrier is to you, because how people have made that so important that you run around fearful that someone's going to reject you because you don't look right. And a man, because he doesn't provide right or doesn't have a big enough truck or a big enough house or whatever it is. And when you start to think about how we build relationships when we're always worrying about our budgets and our finances, they're built on a different kind of foundation. In fact, it came up on radio recently. I didn't even put the two together, but I'd mentioned I studied gemology as a child, and diamonds were discovered in Africa in the 1800s, and they were pretty rare. They were primarily only from India and a few other places, and then they found these deposits. But there was so much found that they couldn't let it just go out or they'd be worthless, or worth a lot less, I should say. So they formed the De Beers cartel. And then that became Cecil Rhodes's dream, and if you remember, he created the Rhodes Scholars. And diamonds weren't a big deal. They decided that diamonds would sanctify every engagement with the engagement ring, and that got invented as a way to create demand for diamonds. So they would be demanded by every couple that wanted to support the De Beers cartel, which up until recently was just every diamond you bought. And so when you think about it, do you believe in Cecil Rhodes and his philosophy of life and the bankers that run the world? Because you've been paying for it if you bought a diamond engagement ring before about 15 years ago. Because that's when the Russian, and they were part of the cartel too, but they went a little bit independent, and then they found diamonds in Australia and they found them in Canada, and that changed everything. But even as the basis of a marriage, it's based on a rock, right? A piece of carbon, and actually the carbon has a lot of other applications. It's kind of funny, maybe we'll talk about them later. But the bonding of relationship, the forming of a bond of relationship in the form of marriage, as an example. There's a lot of debate in the world right now about the government, which marriages ought to be recognized and which ones aren't. I don't think the government should be involved in marriage at all. With anybody's marriage, actually, because I think that's a religious sacrament for most people. For others, it might be a license, like getting a business license, but if that's what you need as a business license, we have plenty of business law. You can do a partnership agreement and do that. You don't need anything special for that. Why is the government involved in religious sacraments? That's what I want to know. They shouldn't be. Now, where they should be involved is when two people have children that are minor children, that are innocents. Yeah, we need some rules about how that might work if, there's innocent people involved. But that should be able to be worked out. I think there's plenty of law that protects children. I got a suggestion, though, that a lot of people get really freaked out about, but I think it's one of the keys for relationships to be successful, could be a very good key. How about this? If you're going to get married, how about at the same time you got married, you were required to negotiate your divorce? Now, let me say that again, okay? At the same time you get married, that you can't get married. They say, no, you can't get married till we see what your divorce agreement looks like. Well, we're not going to have kids. That's okay. You got to plan on it in case something happens. Oh, well, we didn't plan on doing this. No, no, you have to have every contingency just like, like the world is. And you make a plan. If I'm going to have kids, this is what's going to happen. If I'm going to have wealth, this is what's going to happen. If I'm going to have nothing, this is what's going to happen. But you lay it all out while you're in love. You see, whether it's fair and honest and true. Then lay out your divorce decree, and you've done a couple of things. One, you might want to avoid it. Later on, you might want to try and work things out because you know how it ends. Two, you decongest the courts in this country by half. Half of the litigation has to do with divorces, just freed up a lot to take care of other law. And maybe you've set a framework that maybe you don't get married in the first place because you can't agree on what it might look like in the last place. And then that might save you a whole lot of time and effort and divorce lawyers. So again, who should be involved in your relationship? It ought to be you and the other party. The government's role should be minimized, not maximized. And why they belong in our marriages, I don't know. I still can't quite sort that out. There was a time, I guess, when diseases and there were blood tests involved with syphilis and so on, but those days are over, at least in most countries, in terms of being required before you get married. I don't remember that being done here in quite a long time. So relationships are about, first, your relationship to yourself, that we covered in the last sections, because you got to have a good one. And you have to love yourself. And a lot of men have trouble with that. A lot of women do too. And it has to do with our self-image that is derived mainly from this carrier or shell, which has, it's a reflection, but that's all. It's like a snapshot, if you will, a picture in time of your expression at that moment. But that doesn't mean you're stuck. My body changed a lot. I mean, people tell you, it's like, I lost a little too quick, but that's just the way it went. But your body will change. I have someone that works on me regularly, does physical work on me, a rolfer, which is an interesting type of physical muscular rearrangement, because they put your muscle structure sort of back around your bones so it holds everything in place more efficiently. And my posture was going a bit, and some of my muscle groups were not where they needed to be. So I do this every once in a while. And the way it works is you also store in your body emotional energy. A lot of people don't know this. And when a rolfer works on you, if they do it right, oftentimes things will get released in you emotionally. You'll cry, or you'll be really happy, or things happen, and it's kind of strange a little bit. But also what happens is the muscle groups get reordered. And then what I did in between my visits, I see her every 10 days the last couple of months, and I've been doing my spiritual work, my prayer work, and it's been reorganizing inside out. And it's kind of funny, I'll go back and see her every 10 days, and she sees a physical change that she had nothing to do with each time. And it has to do with the things that we'll be covering a bit today. But again, it does. Energy in changes form is what I conclude clearly from what I've been experiencing and what I've been doing the last 50 years in terms of scholarship and where I am now. And I say this too, is the work you want to read that someone does, read the stuff they wrote at the end of their lives, not the stuff they wrote at the beginning. Because at the end of their life is sort of where they may have rejected everything they did in the beginning and completely reformed it. And this is where the real knowledge is. It's in that period of reflection when everything becomes an entirely different ballgame in terms of how we look at the world, how we think about things as we reflect on our lives more completely, going back, sort of back over our lives. So here I am, 50 years later, thinking about my relationships, all of them, because I've always valued my relationships as the most important thing. And so I've always spent a lot of time, and my relationships have varied a lot. I mean, as I mentioned, I have 6 children. I've had 3 primary relationships in my life. My first wife, Star, I see her from time to time at the holiday seasons with my kids. We're not mad at each other. There's no anger there at all. But we're very different people for sure, and we both know that. My second wife, Sheila, just recently, in the last month or so, after 10 years of divorce, do I think we finally have a reasonable relationship again. And I'm glad of that. I'm really thankful for that, because you don't throw away 26 years, and of experience. I certainly don't. Yeah, there were a lot of happy and unhappy times in every year, I'm sure, but as I look back on all of that, I wouldn't change a breath I've taken in this lifetime, even the most miserable ones, because all of those things allowed me to see things differently, to feel things differently, and reflect differently in the world, and that was always worth doing. So the relationships for me was always primary, whether they were my friends or relatives or what have you. And this is something else I'll say. I know a lot of people have talked to me because they learned different aspects of my family configuration. And I'd mentioned on the air a few months ago that 2 of my daughters haven't spoken to me in 10 years. And people go, how could that happen? Well, things happen. Families are complicated. That'll change. Things will change, I'm sure, as time goes on. But the point is, a lot of our relationships, I had a man working with me here at the house. I needed an extra hand when I was doing certain work, and he had the same experience, and he didn't know that I had, and it had totally broken him. He had been homeless, he'd been alcoholic, he was just coming out of homelessness, and it was over that. And then he found out that he had one kid that didn't talk to him, I had 2 that weren't talking to me. He couldn't believe it. He couldn't believe that I didn't let it destroy me. But it helped him a lot, because he's a different man from all of that. And yeah, he'll struggle, he'll fall, and he'll rise himself back up again, but he'll never be the same, because he knows that there's someone else that suffered the same way he did and made it, and he knows he can make it too. And a lot of my experience, people say, oh, you shouldn't say that, you shouldn't say that. I'm going to tell you, as a public person, you don't have privacy. If you think you do, then you better get out of public life, because you don't. And unless you're ready to stand before the public with everything you've ever done and face it, then don't do it, because that's what's required. You have to give up your personal privacy so everyone else can have theirs. That's the price. My family's been in it 3 generations. We know the price. When I think about public service, I gave up my dad to public service, because he wasn't around to do the things most of you experienced if you had a dad that was around. But I didn't resent that. Although I didn't have to participate in it, because my mom and dad never insisted on that, what I did get to do is decide and to learn from that and to get that experience without having to be immersed in it as some kind of requirement. But when you got the same name as your dad and he's done all that, it sets something up in you. And then I cursed my oldest son with the same name, and he did the same with his son. And I say that in a laughing kind of way, because it's a standard that we have to rise into, or not. But how we choose to live it doesn't have to be through politics. It can be in any number of ways. And so that multi-generational knowledge is extraordinarily valuable, and I think it's one of the things that we don't necessarily convey. But having said that about families, oftentimes our friends turn into the closer relationships than family members. I can say that's been true in much of my life. My closest friends are closer to me than any of my family members, with the exclusion of perhaps my mother. But my brothers and sisters, who largely lived in Anchorage most of our lives, or close to each other most of our lives, no, my friends have deeper relationships. Now, I have deep relationships with all of my siblings at all kinds of levels, but day to day, this is how most of us live. Our children move on, they create their own lives, their own networks of people, and our tie to blood relation oftentimes is distorted. And so we attach a lot of need to fulfill the other person's life, like our children. Their failings, we make ours. Their successes, we make ours. None of them are ours. Failures or successes, they're theirs. The only thing you get to do is provide an environment for a little while and try and help them see who they are for a little while, and then hope to God that they can see it too. And that's the real challenge, was to give people confidence in who they are, because that's stripped away every step. When I think about relationships in forming unions with all others, how do you do that? that baseline of respect again comes into play. When you look around the world right now, look at our own country, look at the news. It's all designed to create anger, because anger in today's world sells. Fear sells. Look at every commercial. You either smell bad, you got bad breath, something's leaking out of your body wrong, you need a diaper. Whatever it is that makes you fearful, right? Whatever makes you feel uncomfortable about this shell, because they want you to think that's all you are, is that shell. And you're not. It's like the wrapper. It's like so not you. It's so not. And this is the mistakes that we've made, and it affects our self-value, the way we reflect on each other, and how we project in the world. And it's not about position either. And this is what people don't realize is the smallest things can create big outcomes. The butterfly effect I was talking about, let me give you a little simple example. I use it often. It's the guy walking down the street example who smiles at the person passing him. Just for that instant, makes a connection. Hey, how are you this morning? Man, it's good to be alive. That kind of expression of hello. And that person might have been so bummed out they were just thinking about blowing their brains out and they were on their way to do it. But that one moment, that one breath of humanity they felt, they went the other way. And they didn't do it. And then that person went off and cured cancer, let's say. Who did that? The person that made the smile that kept that person from blowing their brains out, or the person that did the work of curing cancer? I would say the smile, because nothing would have happened without it. Don't underestimate one thing about who you are. Just do it. Be it. Express who you are completely as you can in a way of always lifting. And I'll talk more about that as we go on too. But again, going back to relationships with others, here's what I would say about that in terms of bloodlines and friends. The highest form of love, the very highest, and I got this from one of my wild friends, Richard. The highest form of love is friendship. I'll say it again. Highest form of love in the world is real, true friendship. You know, your friends when you're down, they're not going to beat you up. They're going to nurture you. Your friends when you're down aren't going to point out all the problems you have and all how lousy you are. If they are, they're probably not your friends. You just haven't figured it out yet. But the point of the matter is, friends generally are there no matter, they know all your flaws. They know how screwed up you are because they were screwed up with you if you had them for any length of time. And good people, I can tell you this, really good people all have old friends, unless they've all died of old age. Think about it. Good people tend to keep their friends for a lifetime unless they've died. It tells you a lot. Don't meet old people with no old friends unless they're all dead of old age, because you don't want to be their new friend or you'll have the same disappointments all the other friends they don't have had. And when you think about friendships and relationships, they take time. They got to invest time in those. And if you're too busy chasing dollars and you think that's what life is, you'll never take the time. And that's sad, because you look at your children, you look at your households, you look at your friendships, you look at all of it, and did you take the time? And this is where I think, again, we need to slow it down. We need to recognize some things about human beings that are different. We don't need to run 110%. That's dumb. That's really dumb. We should run at 90% most of the time. And the reason I say that is 10% you ought to reserve for yourself. Tithe to your own temple, your body. Give yourself 10%, and your family, your immediate core. Give them 10%. And then you'll always have energy when you need more. It'll be there. The other thing you'll do is you won't burn off the last 10 years of your life. Now think about this. If you run at 110%, you ain't going to live as long. And you're not going to get nearly as much done as you thought. Because here's what happens. This is observation of my eldest son, Nicholas, is compound interest. We know how it works. If you just leave it in there, it just keeps growing and growing. Well, experience is the same way. The compound interest of experience is time in. The longer you go, the more valuable that experience becomes, because at a certain point, mine, after 50 years today, is resetting. I go, okay, on the platform of this knowing, I'm ready to do something very different with what I'm going to teach in the future and what I think is important. But here we are as people, always facing that same choice, individually or collectively, about how we spend our time, how we invest our time in ourselves first, and then in our families and our friends. And you better save some, or you won't have any to invest. You'll be too busy chasing dollars and things that at the end of life aren't going to matter at all. And we'll get to that when I talk about my friend Amy, who's been a hospice nurse most of her life, and she's really good at it. I mean, she's really good at it. She's gifted at it, dealing with people, families who are dealing with a dying person. The health professionals are dying person is there, and the dying person. And she's an angel of help and wisdom. And she's, I just proofed her book for all the people in that configuration. It's going to be good. It's going to help millions of people. I know it will. Because the one thing that she always knows in that last few weeks as people are kind of fading in and out of where they're going and where they are, none of them think about one more day at the office. None of them think about one more thing they should have bought at Macy's, if there even is a Macy's anymore. What they think about is their family and their friends and their relationships and things they need to fix, and they don't want it to be too late. They want to get it done then. Don't wait till then. Reset now your priorities for people ahead of things, for human beings ahead of stuff. Take your time back. Reduce the demands on things and get your time back, because money only equates to time. If you have a little bit of money, you might buy yourself some time in terms of being free of having to make some. If you live a lifestyle that supports living, not just buying a bunch of junk. And the system works to do that. And we'll get into that as we get into this later. I want to talk about death and transformation. I've talked a bit about. I've lost 50 friends in the last 10 years. 50. People I related to a lot, because most of my friends, as I said, are a lot older than I am, because I started a lot younger and I sought out older people for knowledge because they knew something I didn't. Experience gives you that. What I also learned in dealing with a lot of people is transparency. That's hard. You know, with your friends, you're pretty transparent because they see you in your worst. Your spouse probably too, although that can really grind a person too. Happens a lot in relationships. They come together, they're opposites in so many ways, and they begin to, like rocks grinding on each other till you get a smooth surface. Everyone at least half of them quit before they get there. But again, it's about honing the person. If you're prepared as a human being to enter into a union with someone else, chances are the tension will be less, especially if both of you have prepared as individuals. No one's really preparing us to be equipped individuals or just preparing us to be consumers, taxpayers, or some other form of slave. What I'm trying to do in this feed is return you to yourself and then build out from there. The inner work that you have to do, your own naked hours, your own levels of commitment are all your own. The thing I found at 52 that I didn't know, now this is 10 years ago, I thought everybody did this, and I found out they didn't. And it just stunned me when I found out. And I mean, it hurt me. I mean, I was crying about it, actually literally in tears, because I couldn't imagine this. Is that when I look in someone's eyes, I always see the same thing. I look right in, I see the full potential of a human being, that human being, not some other, that person. And I begin to relate to that. I begin to work with that. I begin to pull that right out of a person. Anyone who's worked for me knows that I do that. One of the cameramen here worked for me a long time ago, 20 years ago as a forester. He knows, he's watched me do that. Walk right in, not see any flaws, and pull the best out of people in ways that very few can. Because but I thought everybody was doing that. You know, it's like breathing in Beijing again. You know, everybody's doing this. No, at 52 years old, 10 years ago, I find out, oh no, most people don't even see that. I mean, they don't even see that. They can't look in a person's eyes and see that deeper essence that's there and not even notice it. And it hurt me because I could not have made it. I could not have lived that 52 years without that level of connection with at least a few people. And I had it, at least on my side, with everyone. But that was a very strange feeling. to recognize that that was not the normal. Um, and then I thought about it quite a bit, and that's where we're going to get into some of this, because there's some ways for all of us to find that spot. That's easy. That's an easy exercise. I'll teach it to you. But the thing that I also saw in relationships is this issue of lift and drag, what people call positive and negative. I don't want to use that because it gets overused. Lift and drag, because what we're doing is we're either lifting each other up or we're dragging each other down. So I want us to think about the negative emotions as a drag on your life and the other as a lift on your life. So if it's love, it's empathy, compassion, we're lifting. If it's anger, hatred, guilt, you're dragging. So they need to be dealt with, not ignored, but in the way that I was mentioning earlier. Pay attention to them, take control of them, go deep into yourself to figure out what's going on there and then work on it. Don't mask it with drugs like the psychological industry will tell you to do. Just don't worry about it. Just take a pill and change the chemistry so you won't think and feel that way anymore. What? Turn your humanity off so you don't think and feel what? Is that what we're doing? Is that what we're doing with the chemical industry to feed our bodies this, to turn our brains off, rather than get in there and do the work? How about doing the work of understanding most psychosis comes from the part that we call unconscious, the part that we turn off, having a debate with what we turned on, what we're aware of. And then when the truth comes in here in the unconscious and it doesn't line up with our experience or what we think we believe, that's the root of most psychosis, is that conflict. Truth has to work its way out. And so, like in this conversation, we're having this conversation, I'm delivering a lot of information. You're hearing it all, full spectrum, spirit, mind, emotion, physically. Your whole system's absorbing it. Part of it you're aware of, and part of it you're not. This is the most fundamental key I'm going to teach today. If this is the only one you remember this one. And this is how it works. You go into the morning, I come into my morning, I enter the morning, I do a certain set of things, I do a prayer ritual that goes into the bathroom with me. I sing in the spirit, I make a lot of noise, I move and exercise my lungs, I do a lot of breath work in the course of that, and then I make a prayer, and that prayer is made with words that I speak out, so they're heard and they're in a vibration. And they can be soft, so if I had someone in the house, they didn't have to hear them, and you can do this too. And then I move out of there and I move into getting ready, and you do the thing, you do the final look at your face, brush teeth. But then I do this last thing that I want to recommend to everyone. It's called gazing in your own eyes. And you get about this far apart from the mirror in front of you, and now you're not looking at your face and you're not brushing your teeth. Now you're looking deeply into your own eyes. And you just hold the gaze for 10, 12 seconds, hold that gaze in your eyes and connect with yourself again. You'll be surprised at what you see there. With no glasses on, take these off if you're wearing them. Look right into your eyes, hold that gaze for about 15 seconds, and then start thinking about your day that you're going to play out in your mind. I'm going to get in my car, I'm going to be happy all the way to work, I'm not going to get frustrated driving, I'm going to enter my workplace, I'm going to see John the security guy and greet him enthusiastically, and he's going to smile. And you just set up your day with all the things that you're going to do to lift all day long. And do it for just a few seconds in your head till you kind of roll it all through. And now speak it out. Today I am, looking in your eyes. Today I am going to do what I believe is possible. And then lay it out. Speak it out like a prayer to yourself. And you can use it even as a prayer if you believe in a universal God. Then do it as a prayer as you lay out your day with the possible things you're going to do, gazing into your own eyes, talking to the one person that's going to be responsible for your success that day, you. And you launch your day to lift all day long. Then you get to the end of the day, and now you've done everything else, and kids are to bed or whatever you had to do, and now you're back in there, wash face, brush teeth, another 1 minute exercise. It only takes about a minute. Unless that practice will change. You might decide to have a longer conversation. But at the end of the day, you look in your eyes again, just close, hold the gaze for a moment, get connected with who you are in there again, and then have that, how did I do? How did it go? And do it out loud. Have that little bit of a conversation as you walk through your day. And then what could I do better tomorrow? And then I'm going to set up my night now. I'm going to sleep soon, where I'm going to leave this physical dimension and I'm going to go elsewhere in the multiverse. And we're going to get into that, because you do. And there, it's a whole different ball game, and most of you don't remember when you wake up, but there's work being done. And you're doing it, because you're not dead, and your consciousness is, your body is asleep, because it needs to restore and recover, so it disengages. Your middle place is operating, but in this kind of abstract sort of way, your mind and your emotions. And then the rest of you is somewhere else, doing something else. And then when you drop back into the body, whatever work you were doing there, see, you set it up before you went to bed. And then you went to bed, worked whatever you did, then you wake up and repeat. Do that every day. The first day you'll notice it, the second day you'll really notice it, third day you'll go, man, this is really great, I'm never stopping this. Because it works. You come in touch with yourself. You create self-resonance. Self-resonance is more than you. It works like this. Resonance is X plus X in brackets with a number 2 out of it. That means you take that whole sum and you multiply it again by itself. So self-resonance, this is how you add your energy into you to be a better you. And that is the starting point for where we're going to come back. Is I'll show you how to do this, and we'll get up and walk through it, and we'll take a little break now, because that I want you to really just kind of gestate on a bit as you think about that. And we'll be right back. Welcome back. I want to talk about the principle of gazing, which I described just before the break. And this is my gazing room, at least in the morning. And I was describing it, so I'm just going to show how that would actually go. So the first thing is, you don't want to have glasses on. You're just a little bit of ways, and I'm just going to do the practice I just described. And today, I'm going to start out the day happy, joyous, excited about what I'm doing. I am delivering 50 years of knowledge to all of my friends that have been listening all of these years. And my intention is to lift like I've never lifted before, to make a difference today. In every step I take and everything I do, to lift. I'll see you later. And that's it. It's a real simple practice. And you basically just talk to yourself for a moment, look in your own eyes and connect with yourself just long enough to just look deep enough. And I'll tell you, sometimes you see things that are a little distorted. I've had people reflect on that. Pay attention to that distortion. That'll tell you something. It's revealing something about you. Don't be afraid of you. If you are afraid of you, then that's another thing. Then back down a little bit, have a little more conversation. Find out why that is. What are you afraid of seeing? And work on that a little bit. There might be require other people to be involved. Reach out to other humans. We're not meant to do this alone, and people have been alone an awful lot lately. And this section is about union. This is something you do privately. Now, there's another aspect to gazing with your significant other that is really powerful as a practice. And I want to talk a little bit about that practice today, because as you look at each possibility, and as you look at what is in that union, when you look in another person's eyes that you're that closely connected to, there's magic possible. I mean, real magic possible. So how would you do this as a setup with your significant other in order to really get the full benefit of gazing? And what happens when you do? So think about gazing from this perspective. As you look in a person's eyes, and you look deep into their eyes and you connect with them, and they do the same back. Okay, now they know what they're doing too. It's not just you, one side of this equation, doing it with everyone you meet. They know what they're doing too. Now what happens, Now you have intention involved and emotion involved, because this is someone you're close to. So the best place is to get in a place where you're in a very comfortable position, sitting across from each other ideally. So you're comfortable. And for some people it would be sitting on the floor, others it might be sitting in a chair, just because your physical form is more comfortable that way. But you got to be close. You got to end up about this close together. As you gaze in each other's eyes, you look closely in each other's eyes, and you hold the gaze for about 10 minutes. Now, that's a long time, you know, and even if you've been married a long time, you might not have looked in your wife's or spouse's eyes that long since you were dating, you know. But what did you feel when you were dating and you did that? Yeah, right. Now here's what happens when you gaze for about 10 minutes. What happens is brain activity tends to synchronize. Well, that's interesting. Both people's brains start to follow similar patterns. Their breathing starts to synchronize. They end up breathing in the same pattern. And they end up creating sort of a rhythm that sets up a pattern. Okay? And it tends to fall into about 7 or 8 hertz, pulses per second. Well, that's interesting, because that's the pulse rate of the planet. It's called Schumann's resonance, 7.83 hertz. You see it in the symbol for Earth Pulse Press. 7.83 hertz, pulses per second, the vibration of the planet. That place right when you're between alpha and theta, which I'll explain shortly, which is the place between awake and asleep, where the most creative possibilities exist, where you're consciously aware, but maybe partially not, a focus that's a little bit different. So, and also I might mention, this is where children are between the age of 3 and 5 most of the time, in this sort of in-between state. And we tell kids between 3 and 5, that's your imagination, quit thinking like that, quit doing that. Well, for them it's not imagination at all. It's how they see the world and how they play in it. And we keep telling them, don't listen to that. That's not true, but it is true for them. So thinking about what's going on, and what do we do when we tell them it's not true? We tell them to not listen to those parts of your awareness, to turn them off. They're to be ignored. When in fact, good teachers throughout the ages have said, pay attention to children. They have something to teach you. Pay attention. This is one of the things they have to teach you. To teach me is curiosity is one of them. Be curious about everything. But also have a lot of latitude, not too rigid on the rules as a little child. And you don't know all the rules yet. So you have a lot more latitude. You don't know what boxes you're supposed to believe in yet. So you still have opportunity to be creative as a child that you begin to lose as an adult. Important stuff. So gazing, so the first thing that happens with gazing with your partner is all those things unify. Now you got something else going on. Okay, now I mentioned resonance, self-resonance starts with your own gazing in the mirror, which by then you've already done. So you've got your operating system operating at a much higher level. If your significant other is engaged in the same practice with her time in the bathroom or his time in the bathroom, now they've got double the capacity. So now you got 2 people functioning with double the capacity because of self-resonance. Now they're coming in as a union in resonance with each other. Double that and double that too. Whoa! Now you have some real creative energy coming from a union, the way it was supposed to be. 2 fully engaged humans, not people going into marriage and saying, oh, this is my other half. See, that's another one of those lies, because it makes everyone think they're not ever going to be whole. Right. Yeah, it's not your other half. It's another whole who thinks they're a half, and so they are. No, you don't want to be a half a human. You want to be a whole human. You're human, you know? And that's your analytical and your creative side, your head and your heart side. We'll talk more about that in a bit. But now that's just the gazing piece of this union thing that I mentioned with these 2 people. Now you want to tune that up, notch that, doubling up again. This is called toning. Now this is real powerful for couples to do. Now you put your foreheads next to each other so they're barely touching. In fact, in the tradition in the South Pacific, in New Zealand in particular, this is a common greeting. You touch foreheads and you exchange breath. The breath of life is kind of interesting. That's a cultural thing there. But in toning, put your heads together, so to speak, and then you got this space, and one person starts with a tone like this. Oh, or I, some tone, a tone. The other one matches it. I. Now what happens, those two tones, those two wave fronts, hit right in the middle, and they match it. They create a standing wave right there. Boo. And you do it at volume. I mean, you're going to make some noise here. Don't frighten your kids. Find a place to do this. And what happens is that standing wave will then move into both people's physical bodies, and you'll feel your whole bodies vibrate in harmony together as that energy exchanges between the two people in the form of a standing wave. Now bear in mind the gazing process. What are you thinking? What are you feeling? You should have a unifying thought on that, because you got a powerful creative thing about to happen here. So whatever you're working on individually and as a couple, when you come into that union to work on together, or just to be together, to unify more closely together, maybe that's the only purpose, and that's good enough. But you will do that, because these exercises make it impossible not to do that. That is the result. It's like when the sun rises, it's light out, unless there's a volcano and a bunch of clouds. Otherwise, this is like the real deal. It's just a simple practice that gives you a simple result that always is the same if you do it. And you can't really mess it up. It's one of these you can practice. You'll have fun practicing, I guarantee it, if you're a good couple. And when you're done there, you can move into physical form and have the most bonding physical experience, because you'll have been bonding at a spiritual level and a mental emotional level. And then when you drop into a physical form of connecting, it will be much different than anything you've ever experienced before. And it'll be union in full. Whole individuals bring you union. Now what do you get out of that union? You get a third aspect. This is again, it's a typeset. You have a typeset. You got a triple system here. You got two people coming together. When they come together, they merge with something more powerful called the creation, and now you have one force operating through a union. That's the power of union. This is the beginning of a concept I call, and others have called, mastermind. That's your principal one. You're one with yourself, the one with creation, now the one with your union, and then what comes from that union in terms of family, friends, associations, and so on, that extend out from that core. A lot of our cores are fractured because of the way our lives run. We have a work life, we have a home life, we have a this life, we have a that life. You really need one life that integrates it all. So we need to head towards integration. That means we need to find ways to make these things fit together. And if they don't fit together, start asking why. And can we take a different view so we can live a livelihood instead of a fractured life, compartmentalized like an inefficient government, right? I mean, that was my beginning model in science, was it's better to integrate across disciplines to get something where you benefit by all of the cross-fertilization of knowledge. The same is true in our own lives. We need to learn from our experience, cross-fertilize from that experience, from our individual paths, and begin to put together a life of possibility and lift rather than drag. Now, how does that play out in the real world? What do we see in the real world? Walk in the grocery store, what do you see? You see unhappy people walking around, doing what they got to do with a mask on, chances are, and a cash register behind a glass thing now, and all the separations that have been created. And she's there, and she's thinking about all the stuff, or he's thinking about all the stuff that's going on, and no one's smiling about anything. Not me. You see smiling Nicholas anywhere, you're going to see people changing like light bulbs going off everywhere I go, because I make it a point to. My youngest child, Aurora, her and I do it. We do it as a team. Ann and I used to do it. We do it as a team. Whenever the kids are with us, we kind of plan it out a bit and do it as a team sport, So we walk into the depressing restaurant, because we can still do that here, and we see all these depressed people. The first people we're going to light up is the waitress or waiter and the bus person, because we know if we've let them up, they're going to start spreading it. So we walk in, we make it a point. Hey, how are you? And we really want to know. And I know you're a human being and not a waitress. And I want to talk to you today, and I know, and we do that. We have this engagement We never meet them in the role they're playing, the waitress role or the gas station attendant role or the CEO role or whatever that act is that they're running. We get that part. But I want to break through that. I want to touch the human soul in there by looking in their eyes and they know I saw them. Do that. And what happens when you lift that person, you can do this because we do it all the time as an experiment. Then we watch how they go around the room. And they light up this and they light up that. And you see a few tables start to light up. And then on that day, I kind of wandered over to the bathroom, so I lit up 3 tables on my way and then came back and lit up 3 more. And then we just watched it unfold. And when we left, that place was changed. You can do that. That's called lift. And nobody even knows why it changed. You don't need credit, just do it. And you store astral credits. I'll talk about those later. Those are like in heaven credits. You just do it because you need to. You don't need recognition, forget that. Just keep doing it. And then what you've done is create a chain reaction. Another place that works great is in a cash register line. The person running the registers are depressed, unhappy, you can see it. Don't let them not look at you. Hey, I get their attention. Don't stop till they look you in the eye and then hold it long enough to change them. Just talk to them about something, admire something they're wearing, about the weather, it doesn't matter. Make it your point you're not leaving their eyes until they smile and you've lifted them. And if you do that, everyone around you will see it, and they will do the same thing when they see her, the people behind you in line, and everyone who leaves will do it throughout the day, and everyone they do it to will do it as well. That's a chain reaction, butterfly effect in frickin' motion. It's that simple. All you got to do is be a better version of you and don't let anyone tell you to do the impossible or to be a drag. We used to say that in the 70s and 60s. You're a drag, man. You're a drag. And that's what we're really saying. You're just pulling me down, man. We don't need that. We need lifters right now. Lifting up every way we can. And if we feel helpless, here's the other thing I do as a practice. When I'm really screwed up and I can't get out of my lock of whatever it is that's just pulling me the wrong way, what I purposefully do is I leave the environment I'm in. I get up, I go out, and I do something deliberately for someone else that I can do that gives me my power back, that can lift someone else, even if it's small stuff. Because if there were times I didn't have any money, then I would go out and do something that would just lift someone up in what I said. But I made it a point to go do that with usually someone I knew needed that, just needed a few minutes of my time, and just needed to feel someone caring about them just a little bit. And it made all the difference, because I lifted, and immediately the receipt of that is lift. I go back into my scene, I'm approaching it from the point of lift, and I engage my problem differently. And most of the time I could resolve it at that point, because I'd broken that pattern of drag and substituted by one I knew I could do. I couldn't deal with this, but I can go do that. Let me go do that for a few minutes. Come back to this. Poof, this gets clear. Works every time, always has for me. Do something good for someone else if you can't figure out your own deal, and at least you've lifted in the moment, and know there's others will do the same for you. Let's create some new chain reactions. When I think about, and I mentioned in the last segment about emotional control, this is really important, because the people closest to us we tend to just pick at all the time. You see this in marriages all the time. You see your own flaws, but you're not dealing with those. So the close person, you want to point out all theirs because that makes you feel better about yourself. And you may not be doing that, by planning it that way, but it is the way that the ego works it out. It's the way the storage system rationalizes bad behavior. I blame it on the other guy. If I wasn't in this scene, it would be different, and it isn't. It really isn't. So again, it's looking more inside, a little less outside. I want to talk about the intellect a bit, just in the fact that it gets in the way a bunch, because we give it more credit than it deserves as men, and women give more credit to feeling than maybe it deserves. And here's a real clear distinction about men and women. Most men come at you and they'll say, hey, what do you think about that? And most women will come at you and say, what do you feel about that? Stop and listen more carefully. But whoever comes at you with one or the other, it tells you what side of the brain dominates. What do you think about that is the thinking part. What do you feel about that is obviously the emotional part. One is creative, one is analytical, and the way we typeset children within our culture and many cultures is we tend to emphasize certain characteristics for young girls, and so they develop the right brain creative function and the intuitive side, and we emphasize other things for males, and they head into an analytical side. And in both cases, we do them both in justice, and now we're trying to create something squishy in the middle somehow. But what we had was good. We had children that actually had hemispheric balance to begin with, and it's our characterizing of them by telling people what they aren't and are that decides to shift in one way or the other. That's a environmental function, and not necessarily a function based on anything true, based on a bunch of things people believe, which within the culture and within the context are the truth. And here's what I mean by that. Perception, they say, is all that matters, how people think about something, even if it's not real. And it's true, because people will act on what they believe in and what they perceive, whether it's real or not. If you scream fire in a movie theater, people run for the exits, all right? That's why it's illegal to do it, because people die running for the exits. So, you know, when you think about all of it, the responsibility for who we are, the responsibility for our words, as a public speaker, this has been my whole life, all right? When I open my mouth and I say things, coming into this feed talking about these things, there's a lot of responsibility that goes with it, because you can use these keys for doing damage too. You can use keys for anything. They're your keys, they're your choices. And delivering them in a way where they may be useful and you might exercise your choices, I wrestled with that a lot, because there's a lot of responsibility that comes from that. A lot of the areas of where they hide this information deliberately, so you don't get your power back, you don't ever have your power, is done deliberately by a lot of organizations, a lot of people that would rather just keep it the way it is. The way it is isn't working. I'm taking a big risk on one sense, but the other sense is I have a conversation that's ongoing with the Creator, one that I'm involved in. And this is what I know, is I'm going to deliver my information here. You're going to take what you want, leave what you want, and that's great. And that's all that's ever going to happen here. But if I can get just one person to look inside themselves and see a greater possibility and go do it, I've done enough. And people ask me when I started, 25, 30 years ago, this particular area of my public work, you've reached millions and millions of people, you must have wanted to reach all those millions. And the answer was no, actually not. I only planned to reach one, just one, ever since I started this. You. Each person that ever talked to me or ever listened to me, that's it, just you, as you. Nothing else. If one person that heard me decided they could be a better person for having heard something I could pass on, hurrah, then I've done something good. That's all I ever planned on. But I do know after all these years, having heard from a lot of people, it turned into a lot more than that. And I'm really grateful for having been able to do that. I'm really humbled by it, actually, because I didn't expect that. And I got the big feedback in the last couple of weeks when I asked for it. And I thank you for that, because it affirmed that really it was worth it. And in the sense that it wasn't just worth it for me, but it was worth it for someone else. And I want to say something about that, is faith and doubt is a big part of my whole dialogue. And I'm going to talk about faith from this perspective. I'll tell a little bit of story about myself and how I figured that one out, because it's a big one that everyone tells you, oh, just have faith, as if they just throw that around like jelly beans at Easter. Faith is not as complicated as everyone would like to make it. And how it happened for me is I was being raised as a Catholic. And those of you that had that experience, okay, I get it. I do get it. But at confirmation, I wouldn't play anymore. And confirmation, for those that don't know, that's when you turn about 12 or 13. A lot of other traditional religion has similar things. Age of puberty, age of decision. So what comes about there in the Catholic Church, you take a bunch of lessons and you're supposed to actually believe all this. And when you do believe it, you say so, and then voila, you're in. But I didn't believe. But there's a lot of pressure to say it anyway, even if you don't believe it. And as a kid, most kids just yielded and said, okay, I'll say whatever you want and get it over with. Well, I didn't play that way, and that's a big problem. We'll get into that later. But then the priest wanted to have a conversation, and back in those days, things were a little bit different. And so I went out and had a cigarette with the priest, and I was 12, remember, or 13. And we're having this conversation about it, and he's telling me I should just have faith and just go do this and just have faith. And I'm going, remember I was struggling with vocabulary too, and faith was one of those tricky kind of words because people threw it around a lot. So I said, well, what does that mean? And for 20 minutes, that priest bumbled around trying to explain faith to me, and he couldn't do it. Now, he's in the faith business, okay? That's his business. And he's using that word like he knew what it meant and didn't have a clue. And he wore the big dress, the long cloak to say he did, but he didn't have a clue. And that really, and what I said to him then is, you know something? I said, I don't know what faith is, and I don't know what God is, but I'm not going to quit until I find out the answer to both. And that I would promise. And that's the idea, that I wouldn't stop knocking, but the first thing I wasn't going to do is start a relationship with God with a lie, by saying I believe something when I didn't. And there are way too many people on the earth, regardless of their religious faith, that have began their conversation with God on the basis of a lie. Now, what is faith? Let's talk about that. We've already talked a lot about it. I just didn't use that word yet. It's about doing the possible, about doing what you absolutely know you can do. It's that simple. And here's the deal. What you know you can do has a limit, and the guy in front of you doesn't have that limit. Your biggest dream is a flash in his rear view mirror of life. Right? Because there's another guy out there whose biggest dream is so huge you can't even get in the car yet. But don't worry. You go to the end of what you believe in, what you absolutely know you can do. There's someone to grab that baton and carry it further. And guess who that is? You. Because as soon as you hit the limit, you see the next step in front of you, your next set of possibilities. That's how impossible things are no longer that. Because you only do what you absolutely know with conviction you can achieve. That's called faith. This other thing they were trying to tell you was faith is a different word. It's called hope. Hope is, that. Okay, maybe, hope. Okay, but faith is knowing and doing that which you know to be right and true and stepping into it. And then if you made a mistake, you can fix that. That's what I was saying. The trying is the lifting. The failing is not failing, it's trying and learning and experiencing, just like a 2-year-old would. You're going to go beat up your 2-year-old because he doesn't know something? No way. You're going to let him fall down a few times, you're going to pick him up. He's not going to get hurt too much. I think the Creator plays it the same way. And we think we're so sophisticated, but from the Creator's perspective, we're that 2-year-old bumbling around. There's nothing you're going to screw up at all. You just are going to overplay your screw up, and then you're going to go to immobility instead of being a creator. Make your mistakes, clean up your mess, and as you get older, you'll make less messes. That's how it works. As you get better at it, you make less messes, and then you don't make messes, now you're a teacher too. That's how it goes. So we have physical growth, we have mental, emotional growth, we also have spiritual growth. And you know what? There's a lot of dead institutions in the world that think they are teaching you something about spiritual growth. And if they had, we would have seen some results play out in the world a lot better than they have. I'd say they're failing in every way. And all of you know that too. The belief in our Congress is at the lowest it's ever been. Belief in churches at record lows. Belief in any institution where people used to believe in something, poof. Only thing people believe in is they're going to be disappointed. And we don't have to. So faith is knowing absolutely what you can do and doing it. Now let me talk about the opposite of faith. Because with faith, you can actually move mountains, and you can. You really can. If you know more about what you really are. But let's just say you can just move the normal things in life. Just start with what that's about. Don't jump to the finish line and go, well, I can't move any mountains. You're not in the mountain moving business. You're in the possibility doing business. Do that. That's faith. Now the other part of faith is the opposite. What's the opposite of faith? Doubt. It works against you. So how can you say you believe something and then doubt it at the same time? You can't. That's a lie. That's called lying, actually. That's what a lie works out to. So doubt is the opposite of faith. A grain of doubt the size of a mustard seed will keep everything from happening. Let me say that again. A grain of doubt will keep everything from happening. A grain of faith will make everything happen. Which one do you want? Which one do you have? Doubt all over the place because you've gone to the finish line and go, there's my goal in life, but I don't believe it. But I'm going to do the impossible even though I don't believe it. Forget it. That isn't going to work. You set yourself up for failure before you even start because you're parroting somebody else's parroting speech without considering the word symbols. You're shoving into your own because you even bought that there's an unconscious. There isn't. There isn't. You've decided that. You can undecide that. You can do it gradually. You can do it over steps. You can gaze every morning. You can gaze every evening. You can let your dream work play out in the night. You can get up in the morning. You can pursue your life with curiosity, with seeking answers to your truth, not settling for parroting phrases and memory. How many PhDs are out there? I know a bunch of you. You parroted every speech, every formula, everything. You don't know anything because you can't explain it to a 5-year-old. You parroted, you passed the exams, you did all that stuff right, but you don't know anything because you don't have a depth of knowing because you didn't ask the hard questions and demand the answers. And you should go back and do that and become a better scientist for it because it doesn't matter where you are in the game. Hey, if you still got stuff to learn, and you do, all of us do, or we wouldn't be here. And that is a reality. Whether you have the PhD or the GED, you better be growing in life or you're decaying, because that's how life is. You're either growing or rotting. Decide. There's no in between. Grow or rot, lift or drag, it's your call. Too many people are dragging everyone down with them. And you know the phrase, misery loves company? It does. So does success. Nothing like having successful people around you. It's like a disease. It'll spread. So become the disease of joy for a change and spread that. Think about the expressions that you're giving with your eyes, because we can't use our mouths in half the world now. But we need to start expressing the lift side of who we are within every relationship, ourselves, our primaries, our family, our friends, and then extending beyond that to everyone else. And what are the limits? There really aren't any. If you can conceive it and you can believe it, you'll get it done. Chances are. Be a little softer on ourselves, probably a good idea. Don't beat ourselves up to immobility. Accept grace as something that the Creator would give you. I mean, really, you'd give it to your kids. But think about this too, the hard lessons where you curse God, because I had those early. When Dad disappeared, I cursed God when that first happened, whatever that was, whatever that meant. But then I stopped that nonsense and I started looking for the truth of all that, because none of it made sense to me. And this is what I know. Tragedy provides opportunity every time, not sometimes, every single time. Most of us find that way through. Some don't. Some get lost in it. Right now, too many are lost in the tragedies around us. We've lost too much of our individual control of our lives. It's really, really critical. While we're locked up, let's use the time. They think they've locked us in. Maybe they've done us a favor so we can finally look within. We can look within ourselves, and we can look deeper within our families and our relationships and see the true value of this living experience is in the livelihood, the way we live, the way we construct our lives, the way we construct our governments, our religious practices, everything that we build creatively. Why should we accept a pattern that has failed? All of these patterns have failed us. It's time to reset, not abandon everything wholesale, but definitely reset, but not according to the globalist massive reset. It's time to reset ourselves, to remember who we are. and become that again. Because that's where the world changes. It changes when people recognize their individual power, the relationship they have with each other, and then together we lift. And then we have a new earth. And then we have a changed planet.